I had put so many kind of coping mechanisms in place in my life for my own mental health. And then the pandemic, they were gone. And I'm such an extrovert as well. So my experience was all of my coping mechanisms that made me feel good were gone. I got my energy from other people, and all of a sudden I didn't have those other people. And the only way I can describe it is it was like a slow unraveling of my own mental health.
I think it's like we as human beings, we put so much significance on everything, and it's like actually we are all as inconsequential as a grain of sand. And if we live our lives that way, which by that I mean the decisions that we make aren't this colossal thing. They're colossal to us, of course, but in the grand scheme of things, it's like, so if you can make any decision right now with the knowledge that actually this decision isn't this world-breaking thing, what would it be? And she was like, I'd fire all of our clients.
I took the time and I took the space I was being offered, and I got the help I needed, and that has ended up in a neurodiverse diagnosis. So I've been diagnosed with ADHD in November, which was completely undetected my whole life. So I've now got a framework to start to go, why did I find all of these things so difficult? Why have I been navigating these issues my whole life? What is going to help me from a neurodiverse perspective rather than just doing the things that help everyone else? So and I feel like I've come back from that with a much more solid relationship with Sophie, a much more solid relationship with the team, a much better understanding of myself, and a much better framework in my life through which to manage my own mental health. So and that would never have happened if I hadn't just stopped.
But what I've always thought was interesting is that we've got the language we use, like work hard. Like everything has to be hard, and if it's hard, then well done, you're a good person and you deserve whatever. It's like, well, what about ease and flow and being in your joy? What about feeling fulfilled in what you're doing? Like, why is that not what we strive for? Why is like quiet moments lying on your backs contemplating the universe? Like, that's not laziness. That's really the essence of being alive.
Welcome to the County Business Talks podcast, powered by Picture Book Films. Here, we're going to be talking to entrepreneurs and business owners from across Sussex, delving into the mindsets of what makes them really tick. Okay, welcome to another episode of the County Business Talks podcast. I'm delighted to welcome, for the first time on the podcast, two guests this week. In 2017, my guest co-founded The Joyful, a brand development and digital marketing agency for businesses that want to make an impact, challenge the status quo, launch positive and purposeful marketing campaigns, and build communities for their customers. They are passionate about helping purpose-driven brands grow and supporting impact-driven entrepreneurs, as well as promoting a culture of flexibility, well-being and conscious working in the digital sector. As a business, they stand for joy, authenticity, courage and impact. I met them both at a business expo last year, and we discussed their business journey and some of the tough times they faced, like many, especially through the pandemic. After that conversation, I've been very excited to have them both on as guests on the podcast and share their journey with our listeners. So today, I'm delighted to welcome Reeves and Sophie Turton to the podcast. How are we?
Hi. Good, thanks. How are you?
Listen, great to have you on. Like I said, when we first sort of met at the expo, we had a bit of a chat about it, and I was like, look, it'd be great to get you on. And so I'm delighted. I know you come down from York, Sophie, so delighted
come
to.
All the way
Oh,
to you.
Of course. But listen, delighted. Let's, as always, we're just gonna crack straight on. So. I want to ask both of you, like, you both had long sort of careers in marketing. How did you both meet, come together? Why in 2017 did you start your business?
Wow. It's quite a romantic story.
It is.
So
I love a bit of romance.
We had both, you're right, we have both been working in marketing for many years. Interestingly, both got into marketing in a similar way through journalism. in case you didn't know, listeners, journalism is slightly corrupt in its approach sometimes, and neither of us felt like it was what we really wanted to be spending our energy doing. So we both got into marketing that way, and we'd kind of known about each other on the circuit by different, seeing each other do different talks. Alice came and watched me do a talk at Brighton SEO about user-generated content, which I'm super passionate about, and I think it was the first time that you'd heard someone talk about something like that, and she was like, oh, I just, really like on Twitter was just like, I just love everything you're talking about. And that really pampered my ego, so I was like, I wonder who she is. So then, long story short, about 2 years after that, I approached her and just said, let's meet up. We should do something. And at the time, I was still drinking, and we were going to go to a yoga class. And instead, we decided that we would go out for some wine. And in just that one conversation, we talked about how much we found the marketing industry to be quite corrupt itself, pervasive, how frustrated we were about selling products that we really didn't believe in, and how much we wanted there to exist an agency that was doing things differently. And Alice was like, well, I think you should quit your job and start an agency with me. And I was like, okay. And that's what I did.
Literally as simple as that.
Yeah, seriously. And then, so we had like a shotgun wedding.
A shotgun business creation.
Yeah. I quit my job. We started the business in September 2017. We went on holiday, we sat on a beach like a little honeymoon, decided what our values were going to be, and then we created The Joyful, which has now been running for nearly 5 years and has a presence all over the UK, working with clients that have a global presence. Yeah. So it was a kind of a snapshot decision that really worked for us.
That's amazing. Because I often ask this as well, was there ever, you've been in marketing for a long time, but was there ever, until that point, was there ever for either of you a point of going, one day I'm always going to run my own business? Was that always in your mindset? And if so, where does that come from? Like, was that from a young age that you was like, right, I'm gonna do what I do, and I'm going to get out there, and I'm going to one day.
So for me, it was when I was doing. So I did my journalism qualification straight after university, and I got a job as a personal assistant. Well, it's like a work experience gig as a personal assistant to a freelance journalist. Okay. And he basically showed me what it was to be self-employed. And then my career in journalism didn't work out. And one of my first ever jobs was working for the Brighton Chamber of Commerce. So I just immediately, like, fresh-faced, couple of years out of uni, straight into like this whole world of business networking, meeting entrepreneurs, meeting business owners, seeing all of the incredible stuff they were achieving, how passionate they were about what they were doing. And I sort of was like, I'm going to keep all these people as my friends because one day I'm going to do what they're doing. And it was always in my head, like, I want to start my own business by the time I'm 30. I want to do it by the time I'm 30. And I didn't do it. And I stayed in jobs that made me miserable. And then on my 30th birthday, I'd been miserable in my job for months. Yeah. And I went into work on my birthday, and it's like something in my head just snapped. Like, really? And I was like, this voice just went like, you are 30 years old. You are a grown-up. You do not have to put up with this shit anymore. And I just handed my notice in. Wow. And we're sort of like, it's now or never.
I love that.
And so when I met Sophie, I'd already been freelancing for about 6 months, but like, I'm such an extrovert, and I really need to be around people, and like doing it on my own, trying to figure it all out on my own in like my bedroom was just not doing it for me. And I was just like, right, I need a business partner. And sort of, we're big, like we're sort of saying like every day to the universe, I was like, please send me the perfect business partner. And then like people started to go like, have you met Sophie Turton? You should really meet Sophie Turton. Oh my God, have you met Sophie Turton? I feel like you two would get on really well. And then we met, and I was just like, oh yeah, she's the one.
She's the one. I love that. And what about you, sir? Was it similar? Like, view with the business side of things? What we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'd been freelancing since right at the beginning of my career, which started when I was living in China, and I sort of forced my way into having a column for Shanghai Daily. Really, like talking about fake it till you make it. 23-year-old Sophie, like living at large in China, pretending like I was a journalist. But I'd always been terrified of fully going for it, so I had a job and freelanced on the side, and I just worked all hours to kind of balance the two things. But my mum has had a business my whole life. My dad has had several businesses, and I just kind of been surrounded by this business
You've had that
influence.
influence.
And I love business. Like I feel like for us personally, it's been the best self-development tool ever because, my God, I'm sure you understand that too, Sam. Like, if you ever want to come up against your ego, start a business.
And start a business with someone else.
Oh, yeah.
If you really want to come up against your ego.
Absolutely.
All of your deepest, darkest, hidden neuroses will come out. But yeah, so it was a fear thing for me. Like, it was kind of all of the sort of obstacles I was putting in my own way. And then in 2017, personally, my life kind of just totally fell apart. So it really was kind of well, what have you got to lose? And then having somebody else to do it with made all of the difference. So yeah, I would never go back to employment now.
It's strange, isn't it? There's so many people, what we talk about on here a lot, like when you started your own work, you have run your own business for a long time, that, you know, you almost become unemployable after that. Like I've always said to myself, look, I've got 6-year-old twins. I would, you know, if I needed to put food on the table, I've always been a grafter. I'd go out and get a job, and but it would be a last resort for me. Just because I'm not fine of hard work. As the business owners, we probably work harder than most, but it's just that thought process of going, you know, this is who I am as an individual and trying to do that. So that's really, really interesting. I'm really keen as well because I noticed, obviously, doing a bit of research. So Alice, you also are an author of children's books.
Yeah.
Is that right? Tell me a bit about that. I'm really intrigued to find out about that.
So similar to Sophie, I'd sort of, even though I'd had a job, I've always had like a few side hustles.
Nice.
And with the children's books, I was actually dating someone at the time who was an author, so I was very much kind of in like the self-publishing world with them, and it was around the time where like there'd been something had kicked off in the press around like trans kids once again, like so much hatred from the right-wing press. I felt like everywhere I turned, like my trans friends, my LGBT friends were getting hate, and you know, I was probably starting to question my own gender at the time, and the whole kind of anti-trans rhetoric felt so prevalent. And you know, this was back in like 2014, 2015, and you know, so even then it was really, really starting, you know, before the whole like J.K. Rowling stuff all blew up, and I was having a conversation with my partner at the time, and I just made an offhand comment like, the concept of gender is not difficult. The concept of being trans is not difficult. I could explain it to a 5-year-old. What is these people's problems? And he just went, go on then, explain it to a 5-year-old. So I just spitballed off the top of my head, and he went, that's a kid's book.
Wow.
And so that was where the story for the first kids book came to me, which is called Vincent the Vixen, which is about a young fox who is born a boy fox and then realises that they're actually a girl fox. Wow. And then off the back of that, kind of 3 more stories just came out in the creative process around like not fitting in, changing yourself to be like other people and feel like you belong, imposter syndrome, and then disability as well, because I've got a lot of, you know, disabled friends that again come up again at come up against prejudice again and again. So I sort of wrote those 4 stories, and you know, then met an illustrator, Phoebe Kirk, who's a local illustrator who's brilliant. We met up and sort of had a conversation of like, you know, I saw her speak at an event, went up to her and said, look, I love your work. Would you ever consider illustrating children's books? And she was just like, not something I had considered, but, you know, she really, really bought into the concept of what we were doing. And so the name Truth and Tales came about because, you know, it's all about telling the fundamental truths of humanity and celebrating diversity, eliminating prejudice, encouraging acceptance. So we self-published the 4 books. And then after a couple of years, we realised self-publishing is really, really difficult and we weren't really getting anywhere. So we started approaching publishers because the books fit really well into the PSHE curriculum for secondary schools. So we spoke to some teachers, we got their backing, and then we took it to an educational publisher that specialised in mental health, gender, and, you know, those sorts of issues impacting young people, and they took on all 4 books. So they were published in 2017.
Wow.
So yeah,
that is incredible. That's amazing. Just from a personal point of view. So I've got twins. I alluded to. They're 6, and Luca and Sienna, boy and a girl, and then, you know, Luca has been questioning his gender since probably about 18 months, 2 years old, and the amount he's taught me over the last 6 years of his life has been amazing. From that, but he goes to school most days dressed as a girl. He refers to, and he's really gender fluid, so he'll go from, he refers to himself as he, she, or they on different days, and it's just amazing. Like I say, from a personal point of view, that amazing that you've done that, which is fantastic. So thank you for, I guess, from a personal point of view, and that's amazing. And yeah, like I say, I'm on a journey with him, and you know, on that, and it's been amazing to open my eyes to that thing, and to the fact that you've actually broached that subject and put it out there as well, and there is incredible. So
thank you.
Amazing.
And it came from a space of, like, kids ask these questions and then grown-ups answer them. And, you know, we fully believe, you know, Phoebe and I fully believe that if a child is old enough to ask a question, they're old enough to know the truth. And the difficulty can come from the parents not really having the tools to explain what's happening. So that was primarily the reason for creating these books, was to help parents, you know, and explain to not just the children that are experiencing these issues, but the friends of the kids who are experiencing these issues, so they know what to say when their friends are struggling as well. So, you know, so much of it is about cultivating empathy and understanding. It's amazing.
Look, we could potentially have another whole podcast about this, and we'll keep that one in the bag, because I'd love to continue on that conversation, certainly. But we'll move on. We're going. So I wanted to obviously talk about, you know, running a business, and like as I sort of mentioned with the whole conversation we had at the expo, you know, running a business can be difficult. We face lots of challenges, you know. Lockdown itself, and something that none of us put in our business plan.
Nope.
How do we plan for a global pandemic? So I know you sort of mentioned around mental health and stuff around that sort of time. So just as business partners, talk to me about that period, and, you know, the start of lockdown and those sort of challenges.
Well, it's interesting because we've had a different set of challenges from a lot of businesses. So I really want to prefix it by saying we really understand how fortunate we have been, because we work in a digital world. So when the pandemic happened and everybody suddenly had to come online, we had an awful lot more opportunities to support different businesses. We created a lot of offerings to help businesses that were a lot more cost effective to allow for everybody to be able to work with us in different ways. And our business has grown quite massively. Like, it's doubled in the last year and nearly tripled since the beginning of the pandemic. So in terms of our revenue, that hasn't really been an impact for us.
Sure.
In terms of our mental health as leaders, sitting on our own in a room, you know, when I lived in Brighton, we lived literally just across from each other, and we still didn't see each other for months, because we really were sort of following the rules.
Sure.
And just this kind of slog, this feeling of constantly having to keep everything going, then bringing on staff and dealing with their mental health during a pandemic. Always, I think, as business leaders, and I don't think this is right, but it is kind of like when you're a parent as well, like your needs and your mental health get put to the side to prioritize the needs of your team, prioritize the needs of the business, prioritize the needs of your clients. So it's been like really challenging in just keeping everything going and not having any space, any time. None of the stuff that people talk about as being the positive sides of the pandemic, like, oh, well, I just got loads of space to figure myself out. And I'm like, oh. No. We created a lot, which has been, and we've learned a lot. So there's a lot of really great things to that. But the other side of that has been a real impact to mental health. I personally moved my whole life up to York as well halfway through the pandemic. So we've been navigating having that's such a huge amount of distance as well. Coming out of that, and how does that look, and how do we work, and what do we want to create for ourselves and our company? It's all been an interesting challenge. So it's been ups and downs, definitely.
Yeah. And, you know, I think that Sophie's absolutely right. Like, when the pandemic hit, everything just felt like it got 10 times busier. And I think that, you know, I'm happy to speak like really authentically, but like for me, I had put so many kind of coping mechanisms in place in my life for my own mental health. And then the pandemic, they were gone. And I'm such an extrovert as well. So my experience was all of my coping mechanisms that made me feel good were gone. I got my energy from other people, and all of a sudden I didn't have those other people. And the only way I can describe it is it was like a slow unraveling of my own mental health. I didn't quite realise it was happening. Sophie could see it coming. I was in denial. And then it ended up getting so bad that, you know, we had to have a conversation where, you know, it was like, I am not fit to lead a business. I am not fit to support Sophie. I am not fit to look after myself. I am not being an asset to this organisation in my current state. And thankfully, I have an incredibly supportive business partner, and I know how difficult this was for Sophie, you know, to just say to me, just stop, take a month. And I took a month off. And like, my God, having to navigate all of those feelings of I've let Sophie down, I've let my team down, I've let myself down, I've let my clients down, I'm not fit to run a business, I can't do that. Like, just this world of all of that stuff.
Wow.
But, you know, I took it. I took the time and I took the space I was being offered, and I got the help I needed. And that has ended up in a neurodiverse diagnosis. So I've been diagnosed with ADHD in November, which was completely undetected my whole life. So I've now got a framework to start to go, why did I find all of these things so difficult? Why have I been navigating these issues my whole life? What is going to help me from a neurodiverse perspective rather than just doing the things that help everyone else? So and I feel like I've come back from that with a much more solid relationship with Sophie, a much more solid relationship with the team, a much better understanding of myself, and a much better framework in my life through which to manage my own mental health. So and that would never have happened if I hadn't just stopped and taken that time. And she had to fight me.
It's like, I don't want to hear from you for a month. Well, not as a friend, of course, as a friend.
No,
but in the context of business, I don't want to hear from you for a month. You need to take this time. But actually what it has given is access for us to... We started the business because we wanted to recreate the agency model. And it's so hard to do that with no blueprint for what that looks like.
Yeah, sure.
This is fed into, what does that mean? What does it mean to create an agency model that doesn't just suck the bones of you dry? Actually, it means totally rethinking the way of work, totally stepping outside of this mentality that a lot of creative agencies operate within. And that has really given us that access to and it was permission, actually, I'd say, like permission to go, oh, this isn't working. why, and how can we create something different, entirely different from what we know.
And I guess the amazing thing, like you say, as business owners, we're there and having that. And we're going to come on to this, I guess, with the having co-founders and someone that is a supportive network in that, because to share that burden, I guess, of running, because sometimes running a business can be quite a lonely place, can't it? You know, you can, and I guess did you still have feelings of that, like that loneliness? Because I guess when did you move to York? Then did you say, was this during this period after this, or
it was about a year before?
Oh, okay.
I moved in September 2020.
Yeah, okay.
And I think that probably like added to the feeling of separation and isolation.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of a two thing. It's like, on the one hand, it really helps to have a partner. On the other hand, especially because we work so well because we're so different and we complement one another. And in times of pressure, that can become corrosive rather than supportive. So it's just about communication, isn't it? And becoming really, really, we practice radical candor as a business generally. And we had stopped doing that and stopped saying when things were becoming an issue and letting them resentments build up. So really, I mean, like what you said at the beginning of like having a partnership being the biggest challenge. It is the greatest gift and the biggest challenge.
That's really interesting actually to hear that. Because you sort of, on the face of it, you sort of think to yourself, having a business partner, someone there that you can just rely on. It's not just on me to do that. I know I can rely, but like you say, there's then what comes with that. The flip side is the other challenge. I guess the key, what I take from it, and what listening to you both, is communication, which comes out of a lot of podcasts. You sort of, whatever that looks like with leadership, parents, whatever that is, communication is such a key element, I guess, between you two. And I suppose the difficulty potentially maybe where you were both in Brighton and, like you said, van around the corner from each other, and then having that separation just puts another bit into the
and with neurodiversity as well, because like I haven't been diagnosed, but I've kind of always known I was like somewhere on the not normal spectrum.
Sure, we all
I'm really happy with that. But like it's about refinding what communication works, because like for you it's much better to have that face-to-face interaction. And I'm not massively fond of talking on the phone, or really even talking on Zoom. So I'm not. So it's just actually like, how do we find a way that works for both of us?
Yeah, completely. And I think as well, like when you have a business partner, and like this is what I was completely unprepared for. Like it's not just like you've got a work colleague. It's like a significant relationship in your life. Like you are bound to someone. Your livelihood depends on each other. You're financially bound. You're legally bound. You've got to have like an unshakable foundation of trust to be able to take risks together. And it's as major, like for me, it's as major as any like romantic relationship. And that's really tricky to navigate if you haven't got a blueprint for that, because it's not just like they're a colleague, it's not like they're a friend, it's not like they're a partner. They're like all of them in one.
And you've got to, I guess, everything that you've got to do has got to be aligned and be on the same vision, because if you're pulling in different directions, then there's going to be an issue there, isn't there? And if you can't communicate and share that same vision, then, because ultimately, I guess, we're sort of delve into it a little bit about culture, which is something obviously I always talk about on the podcast, something I find really fascinating. I know, I used to run a hair salon, got the culture complete. I wasn't a hairdresser, went in there, preconception of what I thought a business leader should be. I'm quite people would probably describe me as a relaxed, happy-go-lucky sort of guy. I've generally got a smile on my face. Oh, was this serious? Like, business leader. Who is this guy? Like, do you know what I mean? I just wasn't who I want to be. So it's, you talk about culture, but then you've got to create a culture that you both obviously buy into, and that's got to then filter down to the team. So being on the same page with not only the vision for the company, but the culture. I mean, talk to me while we're on that. Let's talk about a bit about the culture that you guys.
This has taken a long time for us to get right, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I mean, your sort of your values you put, you say about joy, authenticity, courage, and impact. So talk to me about that. Was that something from the start that this is our values, this is what we want to do?
Yeah, but like I said, when there's no blueprint, human beings are computers, right? So really all we can ever do is play out the same thing that we've had programmed into our brains until we are shown something different, and then we have access, or we have divine intervention. And we created the same thing we had got out of in our previous agency. So quite a toxic culture, just the two of us at the beginning. We were working for clients that did not align with our purpose-driven, ethical business model,
and he didn't respect us. So one Christmas, shortly after we started, Alice was really, really, really not doing very well, and we went to this Brighton seafront, and I said to her, "You are as inconsequential as a grain of sand." So I was like, thanks. I love you too.
But it's true, and I think it's like we as human beings, we put so much significance on everything, and it's like actually we are all as inconsequential as a grain of sand, and if we live our lives that way, which by that I mean the decisions that we make aren't this colossal thing. They're colossal to us, of course, but in the grand scheme of things. It's like, so if you can make any decision right now with the knowledge that actually this decision isn't this world-breaking thing, what would it be? And she was like, I'd fire all of our clients. So... Okay, wow. Brace ourselves, we fired all of our clients.
But like one.
Yeah, just before Christmas. Just before we were both about to go on month-long trips at Christmas. So that was really hairy. But what happened was that we got some work in from a company that was based in Turkey, but it was for a global organisation that was much more aligned and fit perfectly into the financial hole that we had just created to the actual penny of it. It was mind-blowing, wasn't it?
Wow.
And from that point on, we've really used that as our ethos. Like if we are as inconsequential as a grain of sand, and we are all about making as much impact, but we're not under any illusion, like godlike illusion, that we're going to, like
change the world.
Although we would love to. But it's about, I think it's really just to guide us into making the decisions that light us up, that fulfill us, that create joy for us, rather than the decisions that are safe, that feel like we need to make them, because ultimately that's never going to change anything. We're never going to create what we want to create by playing it safe.
Because then that's really interesting, because then ultimately, like, we start businesses, and like you said, there's no necessarily blueprint for that, but we start a business, and so much of what many businesses do, when whatever success looks like, is generally based around financial reward, isn't it? So that business is doing really well because of X, Y, and Z. So there was someone I interviewed on here a little while ago, and he was talking, and she was talking about how potentially, wouldn't it be great if businesses were based on, their success was based on emotion as opposed to fun. And I love, because there's so much, the narrative out there is so strong around financial reward is what success looks like. And I guess I was one of those people, 100%. Like, if we had this conversation 13 years ago, when I started my business journey when I was 30, I'm going to be a multi-millionaire, this time next year, Rodney, blah, 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 all that type of stuff, that I was very much driven by the ambition of owning a nice car and a big house. But you, when you strip that back and you go, well, what am I trying to achieve that for? And it's not. So it's so interesting to hear that I'm going to get rid of all our clients because that doesn't fit with the values that then ultimately you're creating. Every decision you make then moving forward is based on purpose, as opposed to
an impact, and net positive impact. I really like that, because we talked a lot about impact, haven't we? Actually, it's about we all make impacts in every single thing we do, and sometimes we might be like a raging bitch and quite, I don't know, just cutting to someone by accident because we're just in a bad mood, and that's going to have a negative impact. So it's like, it's about being aware, being conscious of your impact as a net. As a net impact, and knowing every tiny little impact that is made in every tiny little moment is collected up into something really powerful, actually. And that's for us, that's so much more important. How do our team feel? How do our clients feel? How can we use any profit that we have to do good? Where is that good? How can we know for sure that even is doing good?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's a minefield out there, isn't it?
Yeah.
How can we be right for us? How can we do right for ourselves and for each other? All of these questions are huge questions.
Yeah.
And we're humans, so we get it wrong all the time.
But is there still then? Let's flip that as well and go, because but ultimately, financially, we've still got to make money as a business, because we've still got to survive. You've still got staff to pay, or whatever that sort of looks. So there's always got to be that because a little bit of a contradiction within ourselves that we're possibly. Do you guys fight with that a bit, in the sense that you go? Because I'm still a strong believer that you can still do so much good and actually making a profit and making money, but doing good on the side of it isn't. And it's not a bad thing to actually say, well, look, I'm making X amount of money out of this, but I'm going to do this good with it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And it is, it is a balance to strike.
Yeah.
There are certainly businesses out there who will put profit above everything, so they will try and squeeze every single bit just to make the most profit. Whereas we're about, we want to make a profit, but also we want to reinvest some of that profit into charities, into, we're partnered with an organisation called B1G1 that allow us to have impacts that align with the UN sustainability goals. So, we are committed to doing that. We're committed to creating impact for engagements we have on social media, for clients paying invoices, for reinvesting our profits in certain ways, and then also investing that money into staff and doing nice things for our team and for each other. So we're looking after our mental well-being. So, it's about, yes, we prioritise profit, but alongside that, people and planet are there as well.
Yeah, because the more profit that we make, the more we can use that to make, to do good. So we are very much in favour of, people like to talk about this a lot. It's like, we're not against capitalism. We're against the way capitalism has become. And there's a really, really great book by Julian Richer from Richer Sounds, which is called Ethical Capitalism. And it's all about making profit, but being really conscious about, firstly, where is that profit coming from? Like, we would, for example, if tobacco, alcohol, because I've had my own addiction journey and I'm very much against alcohol, so I'm not going to work with an alcohol company. Like, firearms, anything where the chain of production damages another person. If they came to us and said, we're going to give you £5 billion to do a campaign, it would never happen, but just to kind of illustrate, we would say no, because that is in direct opposition to our values. So it's kind of it's navigating by values, being really true and in integrity to that, and looking for ways to make profit that align with that. And there are loads, because luckily consumers are waking up. Something like 98% of consumers want to know that the businesses that they're spending their money on are doing good in the world. And more and more and more, this is a demand from businesses to be more conscious. Well, fantastic. We happen to be experts in that field. So come and work with us and we'll help you to be seen and get in front of the people who resonate with your mission and your vision. And actually, we work with businesses to grow mission and vision, and then the profits naturally come because people buy into that, and then they want to support you with their money. They want to buy from you.
And that's such a strong message as well from I guess from your point of view. That's such a strong message to be able to put out there as well. These are the type of companies that we work with, and we will help you to get to that stage. But doing it in a good because with sustainability and net zero and all of those things that surround about looking after the planet, that, like you said, it's far too late, but we're slowly beginning to wake up. But it's companies like yourselves, I guess, that you sort of alluded to earlier. We can't, we're not going to change. We're not going to change the world, but you actually can change the world. But just by if we all thought like you do, then. And we all made them slight small changes and all worked a little bit more ethically in that sort of sense, then we can actually change the world. And it's, I guess, look, kudos to you both for being able to do that, because there are businesses out there that are still going down the other route, and we need that mindset, that narrative's got to change, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. And it's, and the benefit now, I think, of the world waking up, slowly still, but they are waking up, is that, documentaries, look at the plethora of documentaries that show you, like, this company's done this, or this company and government often together have done this, and it's not acceptable. Like, educating people on what is going on beneath the surface, because we work in marketing. Marketing's all about the tip of the iceberg and talking the right talk. But you just dig a tiny little bit beneath the surface, and you'll see that they're not walking that talk, most of these businesses. And I really hope that consumers are getting more and more savvy, doing their research, looking at what's really going on beneath the surface of that, and holding businesses to account in ways that that's never been the case before. And the more that we do that as consumers, the more that small businesses that really run this economy in this country, like, we are absolutely powerful as small businesses in this country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. The more that there's not going to be any other choice than for the big horrible corporates to have to take note, because if they don't have customers who are going to buy from them, then they're not going to be powerful for very long, are they?
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I mean, I want to move on slightly, because we talked a little bit about sort of challenges and stuff that we have sort of faced. I'm keen to as well always look at some positive sides of stuff as well, and sort of success. A couple of things really. Tell me about, over the last 5 years, some achievements that you guys have had. What would be your proudest moments throughout the journey so far, and define what success looks like for you.
I think for me, the fact that we're coming up to our 5th year is like a massive achievement. Like, it, there have been so many moments where we've both looked at each other in the last 5 years and gone, you know what, it would just be easier if we packed it all in. But like, something has always brought us back, and I think I'm really proud of us for trusting each other, for riding that roller coaster, for sticking it out through the hard times, because I think, like, I'm so proud of what we've built together in The Joyful, and I'm so excited by the team that we have and the potential that we can see. And those hairy moments are going to come. There's hairy moments going on right now, but we are really, really focused. So I think just generally there's that pride. And I think as well, there was, you probably know what I would say, is we got like an invitation through the post when we'd been in business for about a year that said, you are invited to the East Sussex Women of the Year lunch. And we were like, with HRH Camilla Parker Bowles, or whatever her title is. And we were just like, is this a joke? So we like rang them up and we were like, is this real? And they're like, yeah, we invite like 300 women from East Sussex who are like doing great things in the county, and you've been nominated, so we want to invite you to this lunch. And we were just like, oh my God. So we went to the Amex Stadium and like got our glad rags on and had a fancy lunch, and it just felt so, like, just to have that recognition, I think for me was just so overwhelming, and especially as such a new business, because we were so kind of new in our journey. I think that just reaffirmed that, like, people are noticing and supporting what we're trying to do.
And there's so many businesses as well. What's the statistic? How many businesses fail in that first year? Do you know what I mean?
Most businesses fail in the first 5.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
So we're so close.
7 more months.
You're there.
Is it all going to fall apart in the next 7 months? We don't know.
I'm keen just listen to what you said there. I'm just keen to look at that. You said that with the challenging amount of times you've maybe had that conversation, looked at each other and gone, oh, is this like? And we all get it many times. What is it? What ultimately, could you name a couple of key things that really have stopped you to go, you know what? No, we're not gonna jack this in. Let's keep going because of what?
Well, first of all, I think it's really rare to meet somebody whose skill set and just personal way of working complements yours as much as ours does with each other. As frigging frustrating as that sometimes can be. Because
ego.
I want to change the world. And Alice is like, but how? And I'm like, I don't want to do it. But also it is that sort of drive of this vision of something, a vision of how business could be, a vision of how the marketing industry could be. And we haven't even scratched the surface yet. And it's like that, for me, is like such a big driver. It's like, yeah, we could walk into a marketing director position in another company and do it their way. Or we could go freelance and, still do it their way because you're really working for businesses. Yeah. But we want to create our way. And and I think it's like we've gone through so much that it would be a real shame to not, while we're finally starting to get onto the bit where we're really rolling with it, to not really go as far as it can possibly go. And it's an ego thing usually, isn't it? When we're
And I think as well, like, there's no blueprint, and we've been led to make decisions against our gut instinct so many times, where we've thought with our head and gone, on paper, this is the right choice for our business. And we've ignored that gut instinct of like, but it doesn't feel right. Something doesn't feel right. And then we've kind of, and it's like, rather than gut kind of progression being in a straight line, it's more like a maze where you like keep hitting dead ends and have to turn around, but just trust that you're going to come back to it. And like a friend of mine, when I was kind of going through some of this stuff and in the space, she said, you've got to think of it like a labyrinth where you're kind of, you want to get to the center, but you have to kind of loop round and round and round, and you think you just keep hitting dead ends, but actually you're getting closer and closer towards the center. And so I was like, oh my God. So like now I'm always like, right, it's the labyrinth. It's the labyrinth, and we're just
here
and we're turning around, but with every time we turn around, we're getting closer and closer to the central core of what we're trying to achieve, because we're changing direction. And it's so easy in that moment to hit the dead end and go, do we turn around and feel like we're going back on ourselves, or do we just give up?
And I guess giving up, though, then you'd be stuck in
the labyrinth forever. But like,
either way.
But I think one of the biggest like lessons we've learned in all that is like, trust each other's gut instinct. And if one of us is saying to the other one, this isn't right and I can't explain why, but it's not right, respecting that and trusting that in each other.
So I think that's really valuable. Again, look, I've recorded 25 episodes nearly now of the podcast. So many people allude to that as entrepreneurs, business owners, that and we don't listen to our gut enough. But ultimately, that generally is probably where the answer is. If we know something's not right, or we know something is right, then you follow that path, or you don't. And I think that's a really good advice.
And it takes real courage when someone else is saying, look, my gut instinct says this is wrong, and you're like, well, I think it's fine. Like, on paper, like, what are you worrying? But then every time we've done that, it has ended up not being right. And then the other one of us have had to go, and you know what, that was my decision, and I should have put my foot down more when my gut wasn't right. So I think now we've learned, if one of us says no, it's a no.
Yeah, I think in life in general, it really, there's so much value in learning to listen to yourself. But unfortunately, we live in a world that tells us that we should listen to everything other than ourselves, especially as women. Like your understanding of yourself is so distant often. That's when I say about it being a really massive self-development journey to run a business. That's really the key of it, isn't it? Is to come back to yourself each time, and in partnership. That's also coming back to the other person too.
And ultimately just living that, so as business owners, as people in general, living that authentic life to who you are as an individual, and what your values are and what that looks like. When I recorded a mental health episode around mental health awareness when I was talking to a guy called Yaron Engler, and he mentioned about like the 5 regrets of the dying and what that looks like, and he said, the main one was not living a life true to ourselves and who we are as individuals. And like you said, that as business owners, you go on that journey and of self-discovery almost, don't we? And it's so, I find that so fascinating that everyone sort of on the podcast, we're all on this sort of journey, but ultimately, if we just live that life, just as long as we're true and authentic to ourselves, where the that's where the key is, I think.
Yeah.
Cool. Look, the other things, culture, other bits and pieces we've talked about. The one that I do again always like to talk about is work-life balance. Something I really struggle with. I'm keen to as well. Back to, I guess, the mental health side of things with you, Alison, you sort of mentioned. But what do you, and being diagnosed as well, right? Actually, you said, is it that you now see some of those triggers, and what do you do from a work-life balance point of view? Have you guys got? Do you have a work-life balance? Talk to me about that. What does that look like?
I have had a very unhealthy work-life balance for most of my life. Like even when I work for other people, I would be the person staying late in the office to get stuff done, and I think you were the same, like working weekends and evenings to like get stuff over the line because you've been and you know that is another thing is like you know we've both worked for organizations that actively reward overworking, and when people are doing unpaid overtime, it's seen as, oh look, their dedication to the company is so great, and I think that's so ingrained in us. And then there's the whole like hustle culture and like you've got the same 24 hours in a day as Beyonce, you know, where you're just like, there's this pressure like that I know I have felt so keenly to use every waking moment to be productive. And I think, you know, because my mental health can so easily swing between these like periods of intensive energy and then these crashing lows, when I'm in that period of intensive energy, for me it's about learning that I still need to have breaks, even if I don't feel like I need to have breaks. Otherwise I'm going to pay the price later. And, you know, one of the things that has really helped me, even noticeably within the last 2 months, even though it's come with challenges, is that we've adopted a rescue dog. And having a thing in the house, like I cannot just sit at my desk for 8 hours and not move. I can't, because there is a little thing in my house that I need to wake up for, take out, feed, walk, get fresh air, you know, respond to its needs, make sure it's got water, and for me, I'm like, oh my God, I need food and water and fresh air and exercise. And so I've been giving that to myself in the last like 2 months in a way that I have not since before the pandemic. And that has been a real noticeable change for me. And, you know, any coach is going to look at me and be like, but you're still doing it for someone else because you're forced and it wasn't a choice. And that's true. But you know what? I needed to be forced because the habit was so ingrained, I couldn't break it. And now that I've been forced, now these feelings of like, oh my God, I do have these needs and I do have this sense of self-worth and I do deserve this is now coming. And I think even if the dog now disappeared tomorrow, like I've got a habit now. And that has really, like, you know, I resist structure and routine and I really need it and it really benefits me. So there's that kind of balance to tread as well. And you know what? I've been just as productive, even more productive, taking walk breaks and a longer lunch and finishing work on time. And that to me has been like, I had to see it happen before I would do it.
It's really, because I guess it's trying to set ourselves boundaries, isn't it, to be able to go, you know, that's enough. I need to have that break and setting. But like, I really struggle with it. I've tried to change a narrative in my head and tried to go. I've always been a night owl, so I've been trying to change that, so I go to bed a bit earlier, so I can go to bed with my wife instead of staying up till 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever. And then I'm getting up at 5. Like, I can do a couple of hours work. But you're right. There's something I'm really interested about. What you mentioned about the hustle culture, and there's that thing out there, like you say, that narrative is. And I'll be honest, I've been guilty of it. Like you go, you know, but I'm working all these hours and I'm putting in a shift and I'm 15-hour days, and who am I trying? I don't know who I'm impressing nobody by doing that, and I'm killing myself. Like, it's ridiculous. So you're trying to change that. Like it's not glamorised, and I think that's where, and it was, and it has been for a while, and I think possibly still is to a degree. I know that's trying to change, and I think it really needs to, because that impact. You're right. You need to take that. You need to take that time. And I'm telling myself as much. Like I said, this becomes more therapy for me, this podcast. That's why I try and create it. That's why I started it. But
I think one of the things that I noticed is that, because I've not really been like that,
No,
and where
no.
we've had a challenge is that I've had this vision of what a business could look like, and you've resisted it
Yes.
quite a lot.
Yep.
And I think we're really finally getting there, because I'm
Yep.
just like, no, like I want us to work a 4-day week. I
Yep.
don't want that to be that people have to make up the time. I want it to be an actual 4-day week where they take home the same amount that they would in a 5-day week, just in 4 days.
Yep.
Where they have true flexible working, which means there's 24 hours in a day. If you work better as a night owl, crack on. You don't have to work between the hours of
Yep.
9 to 5, or, oh, don't worry, you can come in an hour later and finish an hour later. Like,
that's not
that's
flexible.
also not flexibility.
No.
That's still very rigid. And what I've thought about this so much, because my mentality has always been, how can I do the best I can do with the least amount of effort? and I've always just been like that. I've just kind of always been like, almost like, how can I tweak the rules slightly to like?
I love that.
And it, you know, and I also have similarly really kind of pushed myself in different areas and taken on lots, and I've got a lot of energy, so I have to use it up, otherwise I become like unbearable.
Feel the energy with both of you in the room. It's awesome.
But what I've always thought was interesting is that we've got the language we use, like work hard. Like everything has to be hard, and if it's hard, then well done, you're a good person and you deserve whatever. It's like, well, what about ease and flow and being in your joy? What about feeling fulfilled in what you're doing? Like, why is that not what we strive for? Why is like quiet moments lying on your back contemplating the universe? Like, that's not laziness. That's really that's really the essence of being alive. And we don't, especially as business owners, we don't give ourselves enough space to do that.
Yeah.
And the knock-on effect of that is that we also don't give our teams in creative industries, we don't give our teams enough space to do that. We expect people to be creative on demand. And then we wonder why there's such a terrible mental health crisis in the creative industries. And like the other thing that I think it comes down to is self-worth. Like valuing yourself. Like, how do I charge right for my time is a question we get from a lot of our clients.
Sure.
And it's like, when you undervalue yourselves, then of course you're always chasing the clock. Of course you're trying to suck every single minute of every single day from your team, because that you need to be able to keep the business running. Charge what you're worth. And then it's and not be kind of, you know, obviously a lot of corporations charge what they're worth, and some, and still suck the bones of people to it. And, you know, and there's a few people who benefit from that in the organisation. But actually for us, we're not out for like huge riches. We're out for what we need and what our team need and the space.
And a sustainable business in the truest sense of the word, in that you're not using up people so that they leave. You're nurturing them so that they want to continue being part of the organisation and part of that journey. And, you know, what we're really working on at the moment is creating like a joyful charter which outlines for anyone coming into the organisation, any of our clients, how we work, how we structure our time flexibly. And like for me personally, like now that we've gone into the process of like, you know, I want this structure to know what I'm doing, and Sophie has this vision of this free and easy. We're like, okay, so how can we put some parameters around the free and easiness to enable that free and easiness? And so that's where the
freedom,
and that's where structured freedom. And so that's where the concept of the charter's coming in, which is basically, here is what, you know, here is the freedom and the autonomy that you have. And we expect you to step into that autonomy in terms of your own responsibility and your own integrity. And here is what, you know, we expect from you. And as long as that is being met, you've got your freedom to you know, work that around. And
it's not for everyone.
No.
Like, it really isn't. A lot of people don't want that. They want
Some people need actual structure.
Yeah.
Some people need that structure.
Yeah.
So, you know, I guess as business owner, entrepreneur, we don't necessarily need as much. maybe because we're always wearing different hats and you go and do different things and you're juggling, so it's difficult to always sometimes have that struggle. But other people don't have that, decide I don't want to run my own business, I want to be an employee, and I need someone to put some structure in place for me to do that. So you're right, I think there's a balance. But how do you, I'm keen to know, what were you just sort of saying, Sophie, do you find it easy then to switch off, like even from business? You're able to go. You're saying about lying there on a, lying there thinking about the universe. Because what I find really interesting, because one of my guests was Camille Pearson, who owns the Float Spa, and she mentioned to me about that, and I was thinking, I need to go down and do that. And like my wife's done it, and she loves it. Yeah, and
it's really great.
But I find it really difficult to do that, to lie there and not. Because like you sort of mentioned about product, I think I could be productive, but I'm working so hard to change that narrative in my head that I need to find. I go for a run most mornings, and that's my way of trying to switch off. But don't necessarily like. How do you do? What's the way? Like you get to the end of the day and you'll go, right, I'm not answering that email or whatever. I'm gonna just be able to.
I don't always master it, and I think it is a practice. So like I used to have it and sometimes I still do, even if I sleep in. I'm a morning person, so even if I sleep in past like 6:30, I'll feel guilty about it. I've had that experience. It's just really ridiculous. But I think it's kind of a combination of becoming really aware of my thoughts and in my journey with sobriety, that's really been part of that, of like being really aware of my thoughts, really aware of like what's going on inside myself that might trigger me to have a binge or what have you. And that's been a really long sort of 4-year journey. And I would say it's not about ever mastering it. It's kind of being okay with the fact that sometimes it's not going to be an easy road. It's definitely not a linear one. And like, I do a lot of yoga, like a lot. Like this week I'm down from York and I've got an awfully busy schedule with a lot of different people, and I'm someone who takes on people's energy. So I know, okay, I need to have at least one night just to myself. So I've booked myself into a hotel with not seeing anyone, and I need to do yoga. So I found yoga in every place that I'm staying. Nice. And I know that that's what I need. So it's really about me being completely 100% accountable to my own energetic needs against anything else, because without that I'm at risk of like and it kind of, it's interesting because I'm here as well to do a podcast about addiction, so I've been doing loads of research into addiction, and the interesting side of having something like that, or having something to do with mental health, and when you have a proper breakdown and you have to rebuild yourself, it actually is such a gift, because you become you have to be so accountable to the tools. Like it's not like a nice to have. It's so like my ability to function relies on this. My life maybe even relies on this. And I think that's been the journey for me. But a lot of the time, like in an evening, I might find myself tempted to like look on the my email or what have you. But when I decide to, when I'm going on holiday and I decide to switch off completely, like my central nervous system often takes a little bit of time to unwind. But once it does, I'm like, I'm not even thinking about this at all, not even for a single second. And then I have to get back to work and I'm like, okay, brain, now we need to turn back on again.
But I guess that sort of side of it, potentially, is that, again, back to probably the benefits of having a business partner, when you go, right, I need that time, as you did when you was obviously straight. But even when it comes to something like holidays, for example, you're able to go, I'm going away, Alice, you've got this, I'm going to switch off for a week, and vice versa. That really
does make a big difference. And like when it was just the two of us, that made a huge difference. But now we've got an amazing team. Our whole ethos is about self-governing teams, so there is no hierarchy. We're looking into having moving our business to an employee-owned model, so that it truly is like a holacracy in how we operate. Every single person in there, 100% trust, and they just step in. And actually, we've got in trouble because sometimes like we might take some time off and then we'll be like checking in, and we've got in trouble from our teams. They're like, all you're doing is making us think that you don't trust us, and it's really like horrible. So can you stop it? We're like, all right, we'll just go back to the pool then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not to worry.
Yeah.
But what
Back
a
in our
great
place.
place to be. What a great place to be that you've got to, because again, back to that culture thing, that you've created a culture then where, like you say, trust is such a big word that
Yes.
comes out of that you trust the team
Yeah.
to deliver on what, so you can take that time out and ultimately trust them to do a great job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you've obviously created that culture within there that within that team that they all do, and they believe that they can do that, and you're allowing them to make.
Yeah, and it's just also like being really accountable ourselves. So one of our team is off at the moment. She's been off for the last week, and there's been a few times where we've had to ask her to like send us some information that we didn't have. And so I said to her, like, I understand that you've had, even if it's just 5 minutes, you've had your time off interrupted several times this week. So have another day off, not necessarily in the space of this week, but whenever you want it, because you haven't been able to fully switch off because we've asked you questions. We should have not been doing that, you know? So it's just really, I think it's just about, it's trust and respect, like really respecting each other's boundaries and then also trusting others when they tell you to respect your own boundaries, which is a big thing for us too. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, look, we're just coming towards the end. I want to, and it's been fascinating chatting to you both. Just tell me, what does the future hold for The Joyful?
World domination, no.
Or maybe.
Or maybe it does. We keep joking that we're going to start a cult, so maybe we'll be cult leaders. No.
Personally think I would be a really great benevolent dictator.
We're going to oust Boris and take the country over. That's what,
You've got my vote. You've got my vote.
No, I think for us it's about it all comes back down to growing the impact that we can have. Continuing to grow in the sense of, we don't want some like massive agency with like hundreds of team members, but, we would like to grow our team by a few more people and support, bigger businesses that can have a bigger impact, as well as enabling that for us to continue supporting small startups and solo entrepreneurs, which we're really passionate about. So for us, it's about navigating how we structure our offering to have as much impact on as many businesses as possible through their brand communications, marketing campaigns, and getting them out there living their purpose in the world.
Yeah, so with that in mind, because the agency supports bigger organisations, we are creating the Joyful Academy, which supports smaller organisations and sort of trains them to be able to empower themselves. Yeah. And then we're also launching this year the Joyful Leaders, which is more one-to-one development and support for people who are, well, where we were when we first started, kind of lost on a beach, deciding they were as inconsequential as a grain of sand. And
firing all their clients going, what do I do now?
And then we have the Joyful Business Network, specifically focusing initially in Yorkshire, where I think there's a real need for that support for ethical conscious businesses and their leaders. And so we're just basically looking at different ways to diversify our offering to support as many people as we possibly can.
Amazing. Well, look, it's been, as I knew it would, a fascinating conversation. Thank you both so much for your openness and honesty. Has been brilliant, and I'm really grateful for that. We're going to round up, obviously, as we do with a couple of sort of a quick fire question, and then I have stolen from Stephen Bartley. He does where on the Diary of a CEO, where he asks his previous guests to ask a question. So I've got a question from my previous guest. But firstly, just want to what one piece of advice would you give to your 18-year-old self?
Just don't worry about the future so much. It's gonna be fine. I think.
I echo that.
Mine would be stop handing over your power. Trust in yourself and stop putting so much importance on what other people think of you.
Amazing.
I would say that too.
I love that.
Can you speak to my 18-year-old self?
Yeah. I speak to my 34-year-old self too with that.
Hello, I am your business partner of the future.
Everything will be okay.
I love it. Right. So one of my previous guests has left a question for you. So if time, money, and your concern for other people's opinion wasn't a problem, what would you be doing with your life and business right now? Just throw that one in there.
Jesus.
Don't worry, you can get your own back on the next guest.
Honestly, I mean it when I say it. I probably would be doing exactly what we're doing. Like, I feel like I'd probably be, actually, I would be speaking out more, which we are on the kind of, on the sort of process of doing. But I'd be doing exactly as we're doing, just more visible with it, louder, more obnoxious. Telling America to get a grip.
I think similarly for me, I think without that fear, without any financial fear, without any fear of what other people think, I think just be way more out there, way more bold, take more risks, and I think consistently with both of us. We're very, very good, both of us, I hope it's okay to say, of giving the impression that, like, we don't care what other people think and we're really fearless. Whereas actually, we do care what people think and we do come up against and navigate our fears quite a lot. And I think we maybe do push the boundaries more than many people do. But, we know that we could do so much more.
It's really interesting because I think, ultimately, I think we're all a little bit like that. We're all, I'd like to say, I don't care really. Well, of course, we do care what people think. Ultimately, we don't. We go through it. If we're nice people, we want to be liked, I guess, from other people. But it's becoming. When I was younger, I really worried about that a lot more than I do. Like, no, someone's got the hump with me. Oh my God. Nah, not so much. But that just becomes, I think, as you get a bit older and wiser, and don't care as much. But it's interesting that you say it, because I'd agree with. I'd like to be that person that goes, I'm going to just absolutely speak my mind all the time and not worry too much about what other people say. But it's we've all got these feelings and emotions and stuff that mix around.
And those feelings and emotions give more empathy. Like, I always say this when I'm doing public speaking, that confidence is a skill. It's not a personal attribute, and that I shit my pants every time I do anything publicly. And I'm a burlesque dancer as well. Wow. And people are like, how come you're so confident? And I'm like, I'm faking it. It's not, I still have that same rhetoric in my head everyone does. And I think that's really important to have that knowledge for people when they're starting out as well.
Yeah, completely. And I think as well, like, going back to the question, the crux of what both of us care so passionately about is supporting other people to achieve their dreams. Yeah. So when we're working with other business owners through teaching skills, through empowering, through creating and holding a space for them to explore and come up with ideas, and then supporting them to put all of that in action, what we're really doing and what we get great fulfillment from is seeing the business owners being like, wow, this is like, you've brought to life what was in my head and I couldn't articulate. And so I think for me, like, I would always want to do a job that gave me that feeling.
Same. I would just want to be that more ourselves.
Yes, totally.
What a lovely way to finish. It's brilliant. Listen, like I said, from the bottom of my heart, thank you both so much. It's been absolutely fascinating. Loved it. Can't wait to share this episode. So thank you for coming on. And as they say, that is a wrap.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.